Rajiva Wijesinha, who's a former member of the Sri Lankan Parliament, joins us again now. Good to have you back on the line with us, Rajiva. Can I ask you, what is the current situation like in Sri Lanka now that $330 million from the IMF has been dispersed to Colombo? Has that made a difference to the country's crisis-hit economy?
Well, we certainly are much better than we were a year ago, when, as you know, the whole thing was disastrous. You could hardly get fuel, and we were not able to import a lot of stuff that we needed. But on the whole, things are not very much better. They've eased shortly, but prices have shot up. And in rural areas, there's a massive amount of dissatisfaction, indeed almost despair. There are lots and lots of strikes. I'm afraid, unlike in the days of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, we have very rigid control of the media, so that one would hardly know that there were so many disruptions and the police being called out to stop these, often with violence. One big difference between the present president and the last is that this one is quite prepared to use strong arms, and people have been badly injured. But for instance, there were train strikes. The trains have been declared an essential service. The public service is really upset because the government decided to make the pension funds take a haircut. And they claimed it was the IMF. It wasn't the IMF. In fact, one of our best research organizations said that the demand came from the club of private creditors. And there was a slight error in your generally admirable review of why we got into this mess. The big debts really started rolling out in the 2015 to 2020 period, when what I would call neoliberal approach, I should hasten to add, I'm not a neoliberal at all. I'm an old-fashioned liberal who believes a lot in social justice in terms of the 19th century Liberal Party as opposed to conservatives. And what you had until neoliberalism has taken the whole liberal movement over. But the real tragedy is that all this money that we got, the 330 million, and we're hoping for another 330 million, shows no evidence of being used to reduce expenditure, to actually go for development. And I don't know whether this was heard last time, but the Chinese ambassador, who's being told by the West that they've got to take cuts on interest, he said very clearly what is wrong is that there's no steps to move towards development. And I'm afraid this present government is very much an urban-centered one, so that while the elite seems to think it's business as before, a lot of suffering is going on. And the fat cats are making more and more money. Corruption has continued. The president, who only makes money for his party, not for himself, is powerless to stop everything else, because, of course, he was put into power by precisely the people who had supported the Rajapaksas, and unfortunately the best of them have left that party, and it's really the more corrupt who are left. So it's really all a very, very sad situation, and people are in despair.
Okay, Rajiva, we will have to leave it there, but we'll be eagerly awaiting the outcome of the IMF talks with Colombo. But thank you so much for sharing your analysis with us.